In 2001, Nokia folded a full-colour screen and a keyboard inside an ordinary-looking phone. This was at a time when every phone had a small monochromatic screen. This is the Nokia 9210i Communicator, and the screen on this phone is stunning for its time. And yes, Nokia made sure it could play Snake. This phone was sent in to me by a viewer who had seen the trouble I was having in the previous video, with the backlight and buttons not working in my 9210i. They offered to send me their well-cared-for example, and I want to thank them for their generosity. And thank you to everyone who supports this channel. As I discovered in the last video, the Nokia 9210 is, I believe, the only phone to have ever used a cold cathode fluorescent tube as a backlight. I found out that during production of these 9210i's, there was a hardware redesign that upgraded from the older fluorescent tube technology to the cutting edge at the time, high brightness white LED backlights that powered screens in the 2000s. This means the 9210i that I have here could either have the original fluorescent tube, or it could be the white LED version. But when I hold it up to my ear and turn the backlight on, I can hear a very slight buzzing coming from the phone. I believe this indicates that this is the fluorescent tube version. But the only way to be sure will be to open this up and have a look, which I'm going to do later in this video. First, I'm going to do something I didn't get to do in the previous video, and properly explore the Symbian Series 80 operating system that runs on this phone. This version of Symbian was developed specifically for use on Nokia's Communicator series of phones. It's also not compatible with any other versions of Symbian, giving it a completely unique third-party app ecosystem. I also want to compare this to the previous Nokia Communicator model from 1999, the 9110i. There are a lot of similarities between these models. Most apparent is they share almost exactly the same shape and design language, with the most notable external difference being the older model is dark grey with black buttons, while the 9210i has much more of a light grey and silver look. I tend to prefer the darker look of the older model, but I'm curious to know which one you prefer. The biggest difference between these two models is the main inner display. The older model has a grayscale LCD, while the new model has this amazing full-color LCD with a very bright backlight. The operating system designed between these two also looks quite similar, but under the hood they are completely different. The older 9110 uses a 486 base CPU, which I've had a closer look at in a previous video, whereas the 9210i runs an ARM CPU. Nokia also completely switched the operating system between these communicators. While the 9110 runs the GEOS graphical user interface on top of a version of DOS, the 9210 runs the Symbian operating system. This reminds me of a similar thing that happened with Palm PDAs a couple of years later, when they switched from a Motorola 68000 based CPU over to an ARM-based CPU. This was a time when these legacy CPU architectures were just starting to be disrupted by ARM CPUs, a process that continues even today. In Palm's case, they had the challenge of how to maintain support for all of the third-party apps that had been developed for the older CPU architecture. Nokia at the time didn't have this problem. There wasn't much third-party software available for the earlier 486-based 9110. They were able to simply discontinue all support for the older system and build their new communicator models from scratch using Symbian. At the time, Nokia's challenge was much more in the hardware side of things. In particular, they were faced with the problem of how do you switch from a fairly easy to manufacture high-resolution grayscale LCD to building a phone in the same size but with a full-color LCD using the same high-resolution 640 by 200 pixel count. This was 6 years before the very first iPhone, which itself was only 320 by 480 pixels when it first came out. But Nokia were able to do this, and they did it at an amazing 149 pixels per inch. There was simply nothing comparable to this pixel density or screen quality at the time. I've seen these Communicator models described as feeling more like using a computer than a mobile phone. After using this for a while, I have to agree. The 9210 even has a dedicated menu button, which brings up a menu system that's more like using a desktop or laptop computer than a phone. Also, the 9210 includes a browser, which when navigating around inside uses a pointer controlled by the arrow keys, really adding to its almost desktop operating system feel. I found that the software Nokia included uses certificate signing, which do have expiry dates on the certificates. Some of the certificates are valid to last about 15 years, but some seem to only last about 5 years. Either way, most of these certificates have now expired. Looking at some of the inbuilt software, there's also a word processor and a spreadsheet program. The inbuilt software in this phone really shows that this was all business all the time. At least until someone installs some games on this, which I'm going to do right now. Even Nokia's own version of Snake that I showed at the top of this video didn't come built in. It has to be downloaded and installed. To find and download games today, we have the awesome Nokia 9210 Communicator archive. They are dedicated to collecting together as much compatible software as possible, and I'm really pleased this exists. I then need to put all the installers onto this 64 megabyte multimedia card. MMC cards predate the SD card format. SD cards are not compatible with the Nokia 9210, and you really need to find an MMC card to use with this phone. With games and apps now downloaded and saved on the MMC card, I just need to slide my MMC into this slot on the phone. The other slot here is for a SIM card, which is not needed to use the computer functions, but I'm putting one in anyway. Now I just need to go to Settings and select Install or Remove Programs to start installing software. There's also another way to install software by using the File Manager and browsing to the installer files on the card. This tends to be a bit quicker than the dedicated settings installer. There's an option to install software to either the internal memory or to the card memory. With the very small amount of internal memory in the 9210i, it's good to first start installing to the card memory. The first game I'm playing here is Bounce. And like Snake, this is another Nokia published game. Bounce is a game that tended to be more common on later Nokia models through the 2000s. The version for the 9210 is interesting because it's designed to work with a very wide screen display. The next game I'm trying is a Civilization clone called Mobile Civilization. This looks like a very decent game with nice graphics. But it's nice to see a complex strategy game on here. Another interesting game is Dragonfire. I really like the mood this game sets up with its startup sequence. This is a role-playing game, and it looks like it's going to be another very involved gameplay experience like Civilization. These two games are similar in their depth and complexity, but I also want to find what other types of games are available, which is when I ran into Space Taxi. This is a pinball game that's played vertically on the phone. It's very different indeed to the previous games. Gameplay is quite fun. The ball sometimes feels a little bit slow at times, almost like the system can't keep up. But sometimes it can be quite fast and responsive. It's an interesting mix, and I'm not sure how intentional this was. I went through a few other games, and just quickly, there's an Arkanoid clone. There's also a game called Pyramid, which turned out not to be an ancient Egyptian-based game, but a version of the solitaire card game. As I kept exploring this phone, I started to wonder how well this can play video. The 9210 comes with an inbuilt version of Real Player, which, while it can play video, it does so in a rather small window and not at the highest quality.
Legend tells of the Dark Lord's son and the ring.
I also found a third-party app that can play MP3s, though it's hard to hear the quality through the inbuilt speaker. And of course, there's no headphone socket. And looking at the pinout on the bottom, I don't think there's any way to get stereo audio output from this phone. But this phone was not really intended or designed to be a multimedia-based phone. This was 2001, before these sorts of devices were being used for multimedia type applications. Inside this phone is a 52 MHz ARM9 CPU, and of course I'm interested in seeing how far this system can be pushed. To do this, there seem to be some games that can provide a bit of a challenge. One is called Terraforce. This game puts you in a 3D environment in which you have to move around a maze and battle it out with another tank. This is just like a 3D version of the original Atari combat game, right down to level design. And the graphics do seem to be pushing the CPU nicely. But even better is a game called Meltdown. This is more of a puzzle-based 3D shooter style game. The aim is to shoot the robots while finding all the marker points in the game. These 3D shooters are reminding me of something, a game that is known to run on almost anything. That game, of course, is Doom. And not only can it run on this phone, it turns out there are two different ports of Doom for the Nokia 9210. The first one I'm playing here is Doom 9210. This runs okay, the frame rate is decent enough, and it gives a playable experience. The other port is called C-Doom, which is a bit more flexible. I'm running it here with the Doom 2 map, but it can also be switched into full screen mode, giving you a stunning widescreen experience on this phone. The irony of seeing this on here is there's no Doom port for the previous Nokia 9110 Communicator, which ran a 486-based CPU and could also run an MS-DOS compatible operating system. These are both the original CPU and the original operating system that Doom was originally released for. Yet there's no port available for this earlier model. But ironically, there are two ports of Doom available for the later ARM-based Communicator models. I'm very curious to know if this phone uses a compact fluorescent tube, or if this is one of the later revisions that uses white LEDs. I'm going to take the front section apart very carefully and have a peek. In the last video, I wasn't getting any backlight in my 9210, and I considered the possibility that the tube was faulty, or there was a problem with the circuitry that supplies power to the tube. In the comments here on YouTube and Discord, however, lots of people described the possibility that it could actually be a faulty ribbon cable that runs through the hinge mechanism. Many people provided lots of details, and I thank you for this. From all the details people provided, I now believe it's much more likely that my faulty 9210 has a damaged ribbon cable. With this second 9210, I can now swap parts over to confirm this. But I'm going to wait until I have an opportunity to get a ribbon cable before doing that, because I don't want to unnecessarily risk any potential damage to this working 9210. I just need to remove this rubber insulator so I can see the actual tube itself, and there it is. While I've got this phone open, I'm going to try powering it up so I can see the tube working. And there it goes with all its fluorescent goodness. I still have more things I want to try. One of the best games I found on here is Rayman. This is by Gameloft, a company well known for top quality mobile gaming back in these early days. This game really shows off the fine detail of this display. In fact, it's all a bit too detailed and tiny. You really have to look closely just to see how good this game looks. For some reason, I'm having a lot of trouble getting used to the key mapping on this game, making it a bit hard for me to play. This game was released on a huge number of different platforms, including many portable systems. Despite this, I've never actually played it before. I also note that Wikipedia doesn't mention the Nokia 9210 or Symbian Series 80 in their list of platforms this game was released for, though they do mention the N-Gage, which is a Nokia platform but not a compatible system. I'm really enjoying exploring the 9210i. It's an amazingly powerful computer inside a phone. I also found a demo scene demo that was released for this phone by Pygmy Projects. This came out in 2001, the same year as the phone itself was released, and this really shows the powerful capabilities of this phone. Nokia continued to release communicator models for the next few years. I'm looking forward to hopefully seeing some of these later models down the line. Until then, I've really enjoyed seeing what Nokia were doing when they were arguably at their peak before the 2000s shredded this brand. But that's it for the moment, and I'll see you next time.
Who will close my eyes for me when my last exhalation slips out of the scene? No BPM left inside the machine. Who will close my eyes for me? Piercing wink out of a CRT screen. No BPM left inside the machine.